Hello and welcome to GearHeads. My name's Jesse, and today we're going to be going over the top 5 dumbest things that car manufacturers are doing on newer vehicles. Now, not all of this is new. Some of this stuff's been around for quite a while now. Some of these things are a lot newer, and this list of things that I don't agree with and that I don't personally like, but it's also things that I just don't understand why they're being done at all. You know, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, and car manufacturers seem to be really good at trying to fix things that aren't broken, creating a new list of complex issues or potential issues that could arise later. Now, let's go ahead and just get started with the list. I'm sure there's going to be things that I don't mention because I'm just given 5 right now, but there's a plethora of examples out there that I'm probably not going to get to. So if I don't list it and you have an opinion, drop a comment down below and tell everybody else and tell me. I do my best to read through the comments. And also, if you have an explanation for something that I, had said, I don't see why or don't get it, please, if you have a good explanation, tell me. I'd be happy to change my mind or understand something that I don't. I'm happy to learn. But anyway, let's start with number 5. In my opinion, the electric shifters that they put into newer cars. So this would be like, a lot of German stuff does this now. Chrysler's been doing this on a lot of their things. Let's be honest, everybody's starting to move in this direction and get there. You no longer have a mechanical linkage from the shifter, whether it's on the stock or whether it's down above the transmission tunnel or center console area. You no longer have a mechanical linkage to actually put the car into gear. I don't like it. This one does actually make a little more sense to me than some of the other things, because I get that manufacturers want to be able to have the computer just control everything in the car. They're trying to build that technology so that we can get to the point where, we have autonomous cars and stuff that are driving us around. Personally though, it's added complexity, and it creates what if scenarios where, what if that electronic part, breaks? Now I can't move it at all. What if the battery's dead? Now I can't put the car in neutral if I need to move it or roll it. What if this, what if that? There's a lot of scenarios I can think of where this is a problem and I don't like it, and I can think of this because I have used get-arounds for these on older vehicles. For example, I had a Ford truck in recently that you couldn't shift it at all, and whether the truck was started or not, you could not shift it. In fact, actually the vehicle would not start, but it was all the way out in the parking lot, and it would have been a pain to push in. But guess what? I was able to put the key in the run position, jump the starter solenoid, get it running, and I was able to have my coworker driving in. They put their foot on the brake pedal, I stepped down underneath the thing, and I manually shifted it over into reverse and then into drive, and they drove it right into the shop. There's definitely scenarios where maybe you're not already at the shop like we were, but I could see a lot of scenarios where that kind of thing could be useful. Also, if you're doing a big project on a car, so this would be maybe more for you DIY people or for other techs like me. If you're doing a big project on a car and you got the battery unhooked, you now can't put the vehicle in neutral if you need to. There is situations where you would want to be able to do that, and if you didn't have it set into neutral before you disconnected the battery, then too bad. You're going to have to hook it back up, and hopefully there's nothing else around the car that you have unplugged that's going to be unhappy. It shouldn't be an issue if the key's off, but still some modules will get upset about it. Whatever. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next one now. Number 4, automatic start stop. Now, this does not apply for hybrid vehicles because it makes sense. The engine's only going to be running when it needs to be running, whether it's a power demand or whether it needs to be charging the batteries. And then when it shuts off and it needs to be started up again, you've got your nice big electric motor to start the motor back up, start the engine back up, no problem, and you can keep moving. The difference is when they're doing this on standard like gasoline and diesel vehicles, you're using a regular starter to do this, and it's going to put so much more wear and tear on that thing over the years. I know why it's been done to meet gas mileage and EPA regulations. When all the cars driving around in major cities these days in a lot of stop and go traffic, there probably is a lot of emissions and fuel saved by shutting the vehicle off and turning it back on when you're ready to move again. So I understand why, but I personally don't like it and wouldn't want it on any of my vehicles. And if I did have a vehicle that had it, I would want the option to be able to shut it off. First off, if I'm sitting there what if somebody's coming and I need to hit the gas and get out of the way to avoid an accident? It's just going to take a little longer to do that if the vehicle's off and has an auto start stop feature. I have been in 1 or 2 situations in my own life where I had to move out of the way to get out of an accident. And you know, that's one thing I think about when I see stuff like that on modern cars. The other thing is, a starter is a very strong, you know, the starter motor is a very strong component in the car, but it still has a life, and the more wear and tear you're putting on that thing, the more you're going to have to replace it, and they're not cheap necessarily. And also on a lot of modern cars that are, especially ones that are using these auto start stop features, replacing the starter is a lot bigger job than it used to be on some of the simpler older vehicles. For example, you know, some of the newer BMWs, it's like an 8-hour job, or at least by the book it says it charges for an 8-hour job just to replace your starter. Now, I don't want to have to be, you know, replacing the starters really often when they're going to be expensive to buy and expensive for the labor to replace it, and it could have lasted a lot longer if the car didn't have the auto start stop feature on it. So once again, that one, there's, you know, it makes sense and I understand why, but I personally just don't like it and I'm not a fan. Number 3, transmission pans that do not have a drain plug. Why? There is no good reason for this. I do not understand it. You have the transmission, you've got a pan down there, but you have to take all the bolts out and then make a big mess when you're trying to lower it down and hope you get all of it caught in your oil, you know, drain. If you're working as a DIY at home, it's a lot harder to deal with this and do it. Yes, you can get a vacula, you know, one of those vacuum suckers, sometimes stick it down the transmission tube, you know, the filler tube, and pull it out, but if you're working in a shop, that really takes a lot more time than you want to be spending when you're supposed to be getting the job done. I just don't see the reason to take those away. It's so easy to just have a bolt in the bottom of the transmission, drain it out, then you can take the pan out, nice and easy, and replace your filter, put it all back together, fill it up, you're good to go. And the whole job is just, you know, it's just smoother and easier because of it. And I don't see any good reasons in my head why they would be taking them away. The biggest one that I hate that does this is the some of the newer Chryslers, like the not brand new, but like I was working on a Chrysler Town and Country. I don't remember, is one of the V6 motors. I think they're probably all V6s now, unless they have a 4-cylinder option. But anyway, the transmission pan on that thing sits at like a diagonal angle kind of. So they're also siliconed on. So here's what happens when you go to do it. The pan's at an angle, the level is above the pan, in the, you know, the fluid level is above the bottom of the pan, and it's siliconed on there. So every single time I've ever had to do one of those transmission pans, you go to take the bolts out, you get your tray ready underneath to catch all the fluid, and then you have to pry off and break that thing loose to get it down, and guess what happens? Since it's siliconed on there, you're prying and prying, it doesn't want to go, and then suddenly it finally comes down and breaks free. And when it comes down, because the level is higher than the pan is, fluid shoots in all directions everywhere and makes a giant mess. Why, guys? It could have all been avoided, and it would have been so much easier if you just had a drain plug right there, and then no big deal. Drain plug, let it out. I already said this. This one really bothers me. And now number 2, while we are on the subject of transmissions, non-serviceable transmissions. Yeah, right. Nowadays, a lot of manufacturers are selling, you know, vehicles, whether it's cars, some trucks. They say that the transmission is now non-serviceable. The fluid is good for the life of the unit. Really? If I stick you on a desert island and I give you one big meal, but that's all you ever get, yeah, you're not going to live very long. But guess what? It will last you the rest of your life. Your life's just not going to be as long because you're not going to have any more meals after that. Now, obviously, comparing to a transmission, that might be a little bit dramatic of an example, but you get the point. If you're replacing your fluid every 30,000 miles or at least every 60,000 miles, and if you're not going to do that at least every 100,000 miles, you should definitely get a longer life out of your transmission. And the truth is, I feel like we see a lot more failures in transmissions happening a lot earlier in their life than we used to or than they should. For example, I just had a Ford Explorer in the other day that was a 3.5. The dealer service interval for that is 150,000 miles. This thing already is starting to have shifting problems, and we said, look, if something's bad in the transmission, we can't guarantee that, you know, that this is gonna fix it. But if it's being caused because of the bad fluid, it might improve the problem. But this thing's only at 60,000 miles, not even halfway yet to when Ford says you should, you know, change the fluid or do the service interval. And I pulled the fluid out, it was black as sin, super dark and thick, and it smelled awful. You know, 60,000 miles, it should have been done. And that's regularly an interval that we would always recommend doing it anyways. So I don't believe them, and I also don't believe them, you know, while I'm on that topic, I also don't believe them when they say, you know, a lot of manufacturers now are giving higher and higher, you know, recommendations for oil change intervals. Some of them have had to pull that number back because of getting sued and people having problems, sludging issues, or other, you know, oil loss related issues, because at the same time, you'll have the manufacturers saying, oh, okay, you don't need to change your oil more than every 10,000 miles. But if you have an engine that burns oil or leaks a little bit, for example, I'll just use the burning oil example though, because a lot of manufacturers will say if you have a problem with your car and it's burning oil, they won't warranty it out unless it's burning more than a quart every 1,000 miles. Most manufacturers say that's the acceptable limit, a quart every 1,000 miles. That is not acceptable in any limit. You know, if you got an old beater that you put around town and you top it off when you need to, that's one thing. But when you drive a newer, nicer vehicle that you paid a lot of good money for, you shouldn't be having to worry about that. And here's the other thing that contradicts the problem. If they say that's normal, or, you know, normal, a quart every 5,000 miles, or a quart every 1,000 miles, you're going to go through 5 quarts before you even hit a 5,000 mile oil change, much less a 10,000 mile oil change. If nothing else, I feel like oil changes should get done because it's healthier for the motor, but also because of the simple fact that people are going to be looking at your vehicle. You know, we put it up on the rack and we check the vehicle out while we're underneath there and make sure at least everything else is okay. We check the other fluids. The longer intervals you space out, the more problems are going to happen and arise that, you know, could have been checked and caught sooner. And that's, you know, an unfortunate thing. But I'm sorry for rambling. That's like a whole nother addition into this top 5 list. So maybe that was number, what, as I was on 2 with the no transmission dipstick thing there. So anyways, my bad for rambling, but let's get to the last item now. No oil dipstick. Once again, why? You know, and the Germans are the ones that started doing this first. I can't say that I've seen it too much on other stuff, and that's because we don't usually work on things that are that new. Most stuff we work on is, you know, by this period is out of warranty. But why? Why no oil dipstick? You know, I just had a Ford in here the other day, and one thing that helped me lead me to my diagnosis is the fact that I checked the oil on the dipstick, and the oil was over full. It was above the full line, and I could smell gasoline on it. You know, the Germans will say, you should drain it, measure how much came out, whatever. No thank you. Why? Why get rid of the dipstick? I can easily just pull it, check it, smell it, put it back, whatever. It's such a simple thing. It cannot cost that much money. And then, by the way, to replace that, they have the electronic sensors now. Those things fail and go bad. We've replaced plenty of them here. You know, I've never had to replace a, you know, dipstick because it just went bad. Anytime we've ever had to replace a dipstick, it's because somebody was being a dipstick and broke the top of the dipstick off. But that doesn't excuse getting rid of them altogether, in my opinion. So that's it, you know, honestly. At the end of the day, all these things that I've listed in this video really are just my opinion and my thoughts on it. So if you agree with me, leave a thumbs up. If you disagree with me on any of these things or you have further explanation for them, then please leave a comment down below and tell me your thoughts, tell me why. You know, I can be open-minded about it. I'm not trying to be closed-minded here. These are all definitely my thoughts, and I just shared what I feel about it. But if there's a good reason, then I will happily change my mind and humble myself. And if it's really good, maybe I'll even make a video and say I was wrong and this is why, and explain it properly once I've actually come to understand it. So in any case, if you guys enjoyed the video, then like I already said, hit the thumbs up button. I appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button. And as always, keep wrenching.